Welcome back to the Longbow of the Chosen 1.2 class guides. Today we're going to talk about Shinobis. Now, in the past, in my previous guides, I was listing 3 different builds for Shinobis. If I remember correctly, the Shooty, the Stabby or Blade Shinobi, and then also a stealth variant, with like the stealth variant being kind of the officer type and the other 2 being more an offensive damage dealer Shinobi. And over the course of the last couple of years, my view on this has kind of shifted a little bit, where I'm thinking all Shinobis kind of make decent officers. I was kind of, in the past, my reasoning against having Shinobi officers was then, if when the shit hits the fan, you want your Shinobi to come in and start attacking people and not sitting back and commanding. But I think until the shit hits the fan, every Shinobi, due to their nature of being the only class that starts with Phantom, they're going to be scouting. And that means they're gonna not do much, sit around in stealth, and being able to use your officer abilities, even though if the proverbial shit has not hit the fan yet, can make sure that it never gets to that spot. So I think they make decent officers. Now, if you have the spare time and the people in your squad, and spend a lot of time in the GTS for officer training, you might get into situations where you have like lots of your Shinobis as officers, but also your specialists or support grenadiers or what have you, or holo targeting sharpshooters. And kinda in these cases, my rule of thumb would be kinda keep your Shinobi officers trailing one level behind the other officers, so that if you bring 2 potential officers to a mission, that the other guy takes over, so that the Shinobi can then do their stealth scouting job and then also start dealing damage, while the other pure officer remains the one giving out the commands, the get some, and whatever else they bring to the table. So just kind of my officer thought we start off with. Yeah, and in that regard, we're going to put the officer yes here for any sort of Shinobi spec. That also means for me that I'm not gonna consider a separate stealth spec, but rather bake that a little bit into the flex of the Blade Shinobi. So in general, I like, so we're talking about the non-core perks here briefly for a little bit first. So when we're talking about what the old stealth Shinobi was, it was mostly centered around taking Ghostwalker and Covert to have somebody with a really low detection radius, which I think is most importantly very useful on your network tower missions, where you want to stealth through to the objective, hack the network tower, and then in your effectively 3 turns where the enemy is stunned, you can kill them all. So having one of these in your roster is often very useful. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it's something to consider. And that's the reason why I'm not marking Blade Master and Cutthroat as core perks for our Blade Shinobi, even though on, I'd say, 4 out of 5 of your Blade Shinobis, you will probably take these perks. So let's talk about the other perks first, though. So we got combatives here. If you're not aware, this allows you to parry melee attacks, and some enemies are kind of hard-coded to melee attack you if you're next to them. That is your, most importantly, your mutants, then berserkers, and archons if they're enraged. So if they've taken some damage and they have this, then the pop-up saying Battle Frenzy, then they will melee attack and they will go for the closest target. And also Andromedons and their second phase, the Andromedon Shell. They will also melee attack adjacent enemies. Other melee enemies, Chrysalids and Stun Lancers, will often, prefer the melee attack, but they're not really always going for the closest target, so you can't really control this. But combatives, for all of the other enemies, combatives allows you to basically shut them down. You will parry their attack and counter-attack. Now, this is basically for the first parry. So the way it works technically, if they attack you and their attack misses or grazes, then the parry and counter attack triggers. For the first attack against you, you get a big bonus to dodge. So that's why it's basically guaranteed that your first attack will be parried. Any following attacks will only have the 10 dodge you get from the perk, and whatever dodge you bring with you. So in theory, it's possible to parry multiple attacks, but only if you're super lucky. Exception to that rule is the Lost. Lost, kind of, the way it's coded in the game is they basically have a swarm attack, so they all attack at the same time. So even if 8 Lost attack you, it all counts as the first attack that turn, so you can, in theory, parry 8 Lost with a single soldier in a single turn. So that's really strong against Lost. Now Lost is a little bit are not that prevalent in Long War of the Chosen. They rarely show up, almost a little bit too rarely, but then again, I still have Lost PTSD from that covert infiltration campaign, so fewer Lost, the better. So yeah, combatives is just a really strong pick, and that's why I would take that on all my Blade Shinobis. That being said, even though I marked this as a core perk and I'm telling you how amazing it is, there are some situations where, sometimes you look at Shadow Step and say, hey, it is kind of nice being able to attack enemies that have close combat specialist, like your late game Vanguards, and if you get the close combat specialist Dark event, then all Archons have that. So you can't combative tank an Archon if you can't get next to them because they have CCS. So Shadow Step is kind of interesting in that way, but I don't think that's gonna be worth it most of the time. Just thought I mentioned it briefly. Alright, Bladestorm, additional free attacks, it's nice to have. I don't think it's an amazing perk, and if you want to pick evasive, I'm not gonna stop talking to you, but I still think it's probably the best pick here in this row. Reaper is your big clean up turn, clean up a lot of low health enemies, and I think in the last campaign we had some really great Reaper chains. We were just cleaning house. It's basically the big button for, okay, I'm gonna stop scouting now, I'm gonna pop Reaper and clean up for enemies and help the squad out now. That's kind of usually your big payoff turn. And then finally, Whirlwind is your safety net, so that you can attack and then move back to a safe position. You could make an argument for, instead of moving back, just attack, kill an enemy and be untouchable, but I think Whirlwind gives you just way more flexibility in terms of being somewhere safe, rather than being potentially exposed and hoping that only one enemy shoots at you, so that you're not getting shot multiple times, and then untouchable doesn't really help you. Alright, that being said, let's get the more flex perks added to the table. So generally, Blade Master is going to be your choice here on the Lance Corporal rule. Just if you're going for Blade Shinobi, then you should be the Master of the Blade. We talked about Ghostwalker for that one stealthy guy potentially in the barracks. I kinda left also a box here around Lone Wolf. It is actually fairly easy to trigger this if you're kind of struggling for aim. Now, melee attacks are very unforgiving with very forgiving actually with aim. You get extra aim from just using a sword. So unless it's a really low aim Shinobi, I wouldn't consider this. But it can make up for this. The one thing though to keep in mind, we're talking about Lone Wolf, if you use your standard flash attack, then your starting tile of the move matters. If your target is standing right next to one of your other soldiers, but your target is next to another soldier, but your starting tile is super far away from the rest of your squad, you get Lone Wolf, even though at the moment of the slash of the attack, you're standing next to your buddy. Doesn't matter. Lone Wolf applies because your starting tile was away from them. A lot of interesting things with Flash and how it calculates things. Then over here, I mean, Impulse, of course, is for just range attack, so that falls off. And then we have Covert as the stealthy alternative, but generally Cutthroat is going to be your pick. Anything that makes slashing enemies better. And then finally here, in the final row, we have the question between being able to reconcile, which is really strong, and then coup de grace, which can be really strong. This kind of depends a little bit, this choice depends a little bit on your squad composition, I would say, or team compositions. If you don't usually have anybody who disorients, stuns, or panics enemies, then coup de grace obviously loses a lot of value. On the other hand, if you usually, keep your Shinobi concealed and then only come out for the last pot on a mission and, slice and dice your way through them, then the reconcile Kana also might just be a dead pick. So I would probably consider coup de grace if you're running with support grenadiers with their flashbang and sting grenades. If you have a healthy dose of psionics in your barracks that disorient enemies or make them panic. And most importantly also then, if you do any shenanigans with thrower assaults, although keep in mind, of course, the golden rule is if you have stunned or panicked an enemy, you don't really have to deal with them that turn. But then again, on the turn where they become a threat again, you will still get that bonus. So it's kind of nice to have. I like coup de grace. I like conceal. It's a little bit randomness for me which one I pick. You could probably in some cases also make an argument for rapid fire. Like you can do things like where you have Reaper on your turn, you run in, kill a target, then use your whirlwind move to get into position next to another target, and then rapid fire them to the face. That might be something. It's kind of a little bit of a combo that you can't pull off every single turn because of the Reaper cooldown. But it's a valid combo. Not valid enough for me to put a box here, but something to keep in mind. Also, I guess it kind of depends a little bit on your XCOM row and how you want to run your Shinobi. Like generally, you're going to be running with an SMG because it reduces your infiltration time, it reduces your detection radius. So for your stealth scouting part of your job, that's probably the most important thing. So then rapid fire really loses value, but keep in mind they can equip a rifle, they can equip a shotgun. So options are there. Right, let's look at the more shooting focused builds. So our shooty focused Shinobi basically revolves mostly around hit and run. So being able to flank enemies, take a shot, and then have another action available to you, which usually, once you get there, consists of rapid fire for even more shots. This all is then bolstered by Hunter's Instincts, giving your flanked range attacks +2 damage. So that's a lot of extra damage here. And one thing I definitely want to point out here is Shooty Shinobi is basically the ideal candidate. Hang on, I mean, if I just turn this off for a second and scroll down here for pistol perks, because Hunter's Instincts is one of those damage increase perks that also applies to pistols. The other one being center mass. Something like lethal only applies to your primary weapon, or AMF on the sharpshooters also primary weapon only, but Hunter's Instinct center mass applies to all ranged attacks. So you could even consider sometimes, if you have bad mobility, you could run a Shooty Shinobi with an SMG and then basically have the Shooty part be your pistol. Keep in mind though that hidden run requires you to take a standard shot, so attack with your primary weapon. But in theory, right, our ideal Shinobi with a grappling suit could grapple to a flank of an enemy, open up on them with a fanfire, a lightning hands, and then go into hidden run and rapid fire. And if I counted correctly, that's 7 attacks, all benefiting from +2 damage. You're gonna be hard pressed finding an enemy that actually can take these many hits. But there's a lot of damage potential here for our Shooty Shinobi friend. I mean, it doesn't all have to be the same target, right? If you grapple to the flanks of 5 different enemies, then yeah, you gotta have a field day. So a lot of damage potential there. Of course, you're not going to be able to pull that kind of maneuver off every single mission, but just keeping in mind, like this is the base strength that comes here with that whole build. And technically you could even get one more attack in if you roll double tap in the XCOM row here, but more on the XCOM row later. But yeah, you could then, you know, just to complete that train of thought again, face off, lightning hands, hidden run, trigger double tap, shoot once, and with the second part of double tap, trigger rapid fire. You're gonna need a bigger magazine for that though. Alright, let's look briefly. Well, I guess down here, Executioner. It's more of a since you're not getting super close, Shadow Step is not gonna have much value. I guess I should have probably more done a double blue here, because Executioner, yeah, it's nice, but are you going to be shooting enemies that are below 50%? Maybe not. And having combatives can be nice, even though you're not blade spec'd. You can still kind of control the Muton for a turn, or an Andromedon, or any of the other enemies I mentioned earlier. So actually, in retrospect, that should be probably a double blue box here as definitely a viable option. But you know, we're standing to my mistakes, and I hope you're not just scanning through the video without listening to what I say. There's also the factor that I often fall into the trap of just assuming all my Shinobis have combatives, and then parking a Shooty Shinobi with Executioner next to a Muton and getting punched in the face. Not that that ever happened. It's certainly not more than once. Anyway, talking about the other perks. If you're running around with a rifle, you're gonna have a bigger detection radius than your SMG friends. And your primary job is probably still gonna be scouting, so the stealth perks are an option just to keep you a little bit more safe. That being said though, Lone Wolf and Impulse are really strong shooting perks. You know, you want to have the extra aim that you can get from those. So probably worth picking up. I kind of like to have one of each, right? This is often where I kind of mix and match. Just so that I have some extra aim. Kind of depends also on your character stats as you come into it, but also having a stealth perk, because yeah, scouting without the reduced detection range of an SMG can be kind of rough. Now, what's happening at Staff Sergeant? There's did you forget the boxes there? And no, it's kind of meh, whatever. Could put 3 boxes there or no boxes, doesn't make a difference. Shadow Strike is severely lacking on a Shooty Shinobi. You know, it's when concealed, you get 50 bonus aim and crit. Yeah, so on each mission, 1 shot benefits from bonus aim and crit. That is usually not worth it. I guess the one exception might be if you pick up Iron Curtain in the XCOM row and having an AoE attack then with extra aim and extra crit. Like, keep in mind, this, even if you rapid fire from concealment, Shadow Strike, the 50 aim and crit bonus only applies to the first shot of your rapid fire. You could skip rapid fire and take concealed and then you get it twice per mission, but no. No, this is Shadow Strike bad. I'm not sure why this. I'm honestly not sure why this is still here. There used to be back in early Long War 2 days. You could have basically a Shadow Strike face-off combo where you would have position yourself somewhere where you see all the enemies, whip out your pistol, hit that face-off button, and you Shadow Strike everybody for nice crits with Hunter's Instincts, extra damage. That was quite impressive. It was so impressive that face-off is disabled and cannot be used from stealth. At that point, they should have removed Shadow Strike from the tree, and I think this is kind of a probably the candidate for my most useless perk in any class tree in the current version of the game. That's a little bit harsh, but anyway, especially with such harsh competition as Evasive. Now, Evasive is actually a decent defensive perk, but just don't get hit, then you don't need to dodge. Easy, right? And your Shooty Shinobi, yeah, you can pick up Blade Storm. It's not gonna get any. You're not gonna have extra aim or extra crit on your melee attacks, so it's gonna be meh. It's free extra damage. It's not terrible, but again, a decisively meh row. Finally, again, I wanna come back to the equipment choices on the Shinobi, and keep in mind you can have an SMG, you can have a rifle, you can have a shotgun. And as we're looking at the XCOM row perks in a minute, there might be some where you could consider doing a more shotgun-focused Shooty Shinobi. Generally, my shooters will run with a rifle. I can definitely see if you have low mobility, high aim, and you want to make a Shooty Shinobi to run an SMG and focus more on your pistol damage. It all depends a little bit on what kind of perks you see, but there's some flexibility there. As for other equipment, yeah, like weapon of your choice, best sword that you have, and then you probably want a vest and plating, and then some ammo effects, while a Blade Shinobi is not going to be attacking much, probably usually runs with a medkit then. Battle Scanner, of course, also a decent additional scouting tool. Or something you could consider on a Blade Shinobi would be also maybe a Mind Shield, so you're not getting disoriented, because Disorient will disable your combatives and will disable your Blade Storm. And it's just gonna be really unfortunate for anyone who's relying on melee. Alright, let's take a look over at the wiki onto the XCOM row perks. Alright, here we are. As usual, I want to try to start with any perks that might strongly, in a way, influence your perk choices. Now, I don't think anything will determine whether you go for a more blade-focused approach or a shooting approach. Shooting definitely needs more aim, while blade is a little bit more forgiving. So if you have the perfect shooting perks, but you're sitting there with a 55 aim Shinobi, you're not gonna go, hey, I have double tap, I want to go Shooty road. That's gonna be rough, that's gonna be hard to support. So I think we're looking more at individual perk choices that might get changed depending on XCOM road perks here, rather than something that makes you reconsider the whole spec. And we already touched a little bit on Iron Curtain. like being the only AoE attack here. And you can, of course, then, you know, Shadow Strike Iron Curtain on paper seems like a decent opener. You reduce the mobility of all the targets you hit. You only do half damage. I'm not 100% certain actually how it works for your critical damage of your weapon, but then again, the rifle doesn't do much critical damage to begin with. So it's probably a decent opener. Now, we tried it in the last campaign and never got an opportunity to use it. So I ran with a Shadow Strike Iron Curtain Shinobi and never got any value out of it. So I'm not saying it's bad. Maybe I just didn't consider it every time it was up. It's just not one of the strongest openers to begin with. And keeping in mind that you want to keep your Shinobi kind of concealed, and as a Shooty Shinobi you probably don't have the reconceal option unless you bring a reconceal consumable, but then again you're kind of strapped for equipment slots because you want to have some sort of ammo item as a shooter. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors that come into it. Now, in terms of other things, especially for the shooting Shinobi. So I already briefly mentioned double tap, where you can combine double tap with rapid fire, right, in a turn, get really lots of attacks in. One other perk we have here is close encounters, which kind of conflicts a little bit with hidden run. So you can't have both trigger at the same turn, but it gives you an additional option to, if you need to attack an unflankable target, so you still get your extra attacks off each turn. But you need to be within 4 tiles. So maybe if you have a lot of mobility, that could be a viable playstyle, that you're kind of playing a little bit assault style. Similar if you get run and gun, maybe you play it a little bit more assaulty, consider shotgun. If you have the godliest mobility ever, you could even consider skipping hit and run and just going for close encounters. I don't... It's a thing I've never tried, but I could consider it depending on the situation, on the soldier stats. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying, hey, it's worth considering. There's also Marauder here, so standard shots are not turn ending, which could give you a situation where you know what we talked about earlier. You grapple to a flank or grapple to a good position. You take one free shot with Marauder, then another free shot with Hidden Run, and then your rapid fire. Like, this is more the... I didn't respect pistol perks, but I will get an extra attack off this way. So that's kind of decent. Also, again, a potential alternative to Hidden Run. That being said, though, let me actually double check in the tree. Is there anything what we want to pick up instead of Hidden Run? Disabling shot? I mean, in the sharpshooter tree, we talked about how strong it is to have a disabling shot person in the squad. So maybe you usually wouldn't want to give up hidden run, but maybe a Marauder or close encounters could make up for it and allow you to pick up disabling shot. It's not completely out of the question. Alright, what else do we have? We have Lead the Target here as a potential perk. We talked a little bit about this on the sharpshooter side. It allows you to activate enemies on the alien turn, like kind of in a controlled way. So then during the alien turn, they just get their scamper move and you get your full move on the next turn to mop them up. So for a shooter, a not terrible thing. But it's more of a, is this really where I want to put 20 points in, or would I rather, as a Shooty Shinobi, pick up more pistol perks? Like, I would always, when you make your choices here for the XCOM row on a shooting Shinobi, always keep pistol perks in mind, and the combo I mentioned earlier with everything benefiting from Hunter's Instincts is so strong, so that any other shooting perk really needs to compete with that. So something like combat fitness, extra aim, extra mobility sounds really good, but is it really going to be better than having the 25 AP to pick up Fanfire? Alright, similar, I mean, there's a lot of... Do I have to spell out that Predator is obviously also a good shooting perk? You know, you want to be shooting flank targets, you get extra aim and crit against them. Cool. You know, I don't want to talk about the two obvious choices here. Alright, what else is worth mentioning? For our Blady Shinobis, Lightning Slash is an extra, could give you, depending on your positioning, an extra attack each turn. Keep in mind, you don't get the bonus damage from tiles moved with Lightning Slash, but you could totally Lightning Slash a target and then flash another target or the same target in the same turn. So getting more attacks in is nice, but you won't always have somebody in blue move range. I think the bigger draw here for Blade Shinobis would be concentration. Concentration is fantastic. Attacks that normally graze the targets automatically upgraded to normal hits. This allows you to melee attack mutants. Mutants usually have, you know, that whole dodge counter attack, and similar to how the combatives works, right? That if the enemy grazes or misses the attack, then the counter attack triggers. Well, grazes don't happen, right, with concentration. Any graze is automatically upgraded to a normal hit, so the mutant will never be able to parry you as long as you actually have 100% hit chance. You know, if it's just a 95% attack, you've played that XCOM game before, that means it's probably a 50-50 chance that you get parried and punched in the face. Anything else worth mentioning here? I mean, Full Throttle is definitely a nice pickup. Bonus mobility after a kill, especially in combination also with our melee spec with Whirlwind, giving you some extra mobility, free mobility that translates to 2 tiles of movement. So, you know, more Whirlwind move to get away. And this is really strong with the Reaper, right? If you get multiple kills per turn, that extends your movement range, so there's more targets in range to continue your Reaper chain. Really strong pickup, I think, if you see that. And yeah, I'd say for melee, there's not much else really absolutely worth picking up. Sensor overlays, I feel like I point that out every time I see it. Passive 10% crit for a whole squad. It's nice. It's nice, right? It's nice to have. I wouldn't go out of my way if I have something that buffs my individual power. You know, I wouldn't, for example, take sensor overlays over concentration if I have both and I don't have the points to get both. Then my choice would always be concentration. But if I don't have something that benefits my Blade Shinobi, then this is a worthwhile pickup. Then we have Maim here. Seems like a good choice as a little bit of extra utility, and for 10 AP that's really, really cheap to pick up. I think the other thing to watch out for mostly is read the text of perks closely if they apply to ranged attacks or if they get you a flat stat boost like this. No, actually, that's for the first shot. Never mind, it's also only ranged attacks. I could have sworn that also worked for melee, but you know, see what I know. Yeah, what else? I think that's it for our Shinobi friends. So yeah, I think we're gonna call it here. This does not work. I still want to thank all my supporters, but you know, white text on white background doesn't work here. We'll figure something out. So thanks everybody for supporting. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time.